So hello everybody, and welcome back here for the final session of the day. We're delighted now to have another excellent panel ahead of us. So the attention now is switching to focus on emerging radio technologies and asking the question of competition or complementarity. So without further ado, I would like to now welcome to the stage our moderator for the session, Bruno Thomas from the Wireless Broadband Alliance. So Bruno, welcome. Great to have you with us, and we're looking forward to the panel. So I will pass over to you to give your introductions and to introduce the panelists. So thank you, and over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's our great pleasure to help moderating this workshop. Quite a pressing topic, to be honest. So just briefly about myself, I represent the WBA. We are a trade association. We focus on seamless and interoperability of services. Most of all, what makes this topic interesting to us is that we have a very diverse set of members. So spanning across the mobile side, the cable, integrated operators, but also Wi-Fi only providers. Then we have satellite connectivity, vendor OEMs, also from the cellular and the Wi-Fi enterprise side. So it's really a huge combination of players that need to come together and eventually answer to this topic. And we cover many work groups and technologies. Wi-Fi is integration with 5G. Open roaming is one of our main programs. So it will be very interesting to help and try to drive some conclusions out of today's session. Okay, so in this context, I would just like to set the scene here on this one slider. It's quite impressive how, over these last few years, we suddenly open up the spectrum of technologies that may have a relevant role in the years to come. So if we look back into the previous decade, I would say that we would not have more than 1/3 of this slide fulfilled. Right now, if we look into the mix of licensed exams, light licensed wireless technologies, we have the cellular world that keeps evolving, Wi-Fi, we have private flavors also coming to play, satellite connectivity, so moving from GEO to LEO, trying to enable new use cases, disrupting backhaul. Of course, the IoT world have been very active and lots of players and potential solutions to cover all this. So in the end, what I think becomes interesting is that today, while evolving to multi-technology, we really need to think about coexistence of technologies and how that can become a reality. And as you mentioned, so today's topic is about competition or complementarity. We have heard also friends or foes, so there are different ways to put it. So with no further ado, I would like just to move to the set of speakers that we'll have the honor to hear from today. So on the next slide, this is just an overview of our lineup. So really what I'm especially enthusiastic about is that we have the companies that I mentioned bringing the different perspectives here into play. So we'll have Cisco, SpaceX, China Mobile, and Motorola Solutions. We'll go by order in terms of their flavors and what they want to share with us. So I'll just introduce, in this case, our first speaker. It's Matt McPherson from Cisco. So Matt's group has worldwide responsibility for Cisco wireless thought leadership to analyzing technology and industry trends and providing direction to product engineering teams from idea to proof of concept to execution. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Bruno, and glad to be on today, and thank you everybody for the opportunity to speak a little bit about I think not only what Cisco's doing, but some of the changes that we're seeing in the industry as we look at spectrum and how to best apply it. So again, my name is Matt McPherson. I'm the wireless CTO in the IBNG group over at Cisco Systems. Next slide. So what I thought I'd do is just take a second to back up and look at, hey, what are the connectivity requirements? What are some of the things that are really driving the use of some of the new spectrum that's out there? And I think everyone's aware that Cisco does an annual report on internet traffic and devices and connectivity and how people connect. And as part of that report, we see some really revealing data. So for example, if you look on the left-hand side of this chart, we see that the number of devices just continues to grow. 10% CAGR overall, going from 2018 to 2023. But what I think is particularly interesting here is some of the shift that we're seeing in the use case or in the industry. In fact, if you look at the percentage of devices that are being used and driving traffic into cloud, into the internet, into the things that we do for work productivity and play and education, the one that's really growing most dramatically is machine-to-machine or IoT. In fact, if you look on the right, I've broken out that blue area, and you can see there we have almost 20% annual growth for IoT. And this means that densities in these networks are going to grow very, very fast. In fact, if you look at that chart closely, what you see is we haven't really even turned the J curve yet. It's amazing to think when we talk about the billions of devices and people that are connected mobily using different access technologies, that in just a couple of years, there'll actually be more machines connected to the network than people. And so we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of what we need to address as some of this goes forward. And in fact, if you look at the traffic that's currently being generated out of LTE and 5G devices and Wi-Fi devices, what we see going into the next couple of years is that the capability of those devices, the average connection speed across the planet, is going to go up by a factor of 3. But if you look a little bit closer, what you realize is that the amount of traffic that's going across the network is going up by a factor of 7. So here we are in the same boat that we've been in for a while. We add these new technologies, we add these new capabilities, we increase the speed and the experience of these devices that are going into the network, yet demand continues to outstrip what we see from a capability and a connection standpoint. So let's go to the next slide. Go ahead, next. So one of the things that we're looking at Cisco is what we would call business critical wireless. What's very apparent is that the world is going to wireless first. In fact, the device that I'm talking to you on right now doesn't even have a wireless connection. I'm coming in through a MacBook. If you look at, obviously, mobile devices, they don't have a wired connection typically either. And so wireless is the next generation. And as we start to use more and more of this, and as densities go up, like we just showed, the dependency that we have on wireless and the reliability, the security, the capability that we can do, those demands go up as well. And so there's two key areas when we talk about business critical or deterministic wireless that where you can control delay characteristics. There's really two fundamental areas that you need to take a hard look at. What's the capability of your stack? So when I talk about stack, is it a Wi-Fi stack? Is it an LTE stack? Is it a 5G stack going into next generation, Wi-Fi 6 going into next generation Wi-Fi? Can you schedule the interface? Is it able to scale and still be deterministic? Can you be mobile as you go from cell to cell and you go between different operators or different enterprises? Can you mitigate RF interference? Can you do this all in a secure way? And what are the power emission capabilities that you have in order to best leverage that spectrum and do so in an economical fashion? Now, the next thing that you always have to be aware of is the spectrum itself, because in that spectrum is the capability really to manage interference or not. If you go into unlicensed, you really don't know sometimes what you're going to get. When you go into license, it's reserved for you. So what are those mechanisms that you have? Not only the capabilities of the stack, but what spectrum can you use in solving some of those problems that we have today? Again, RF mitigation shows up. What's happening in areas like ETSI brand? Are we doing energy detect? Are we doing preamble detect? What if we're in the same spectrum? So all of these things can either produce a situation where your determinism goes down, your reliability goes down, or it can go up if we follow the rules and we look at some of the new capabilities that this spectrum has to offer. And especially as we start to break into some of these new use cases, like industrial IoT, think warehouse, think auto manufacturing plant, think something like a hospital where you're connecting these new smart IoT devices like a heart monitor or maybe a pump. So all of these types of cases are now depending on this wireless connectivity and depending on it being reliable. Next slide. So where are the bands and how are they being used today? You know, it's interesting to do a little comparison here as we go from the lower bands to mid bands into the higher and even up into the millimeter wave spectrum. We see that LTE and 5G is really applying their stack to all of these key arenas. If you look at the Wi-Fi stack, which was traditionally the domain of unlicensed, you can see that there's multiple different areas that we're not necessarily chasing. But at the same time, having the ability to use some of this unlicensed spectrum in a very economical way. So again, what we believe is going on and what's happening as we move forward here is that heterogeneous access is going to be the best solution most of the time in order to connect as many people as you can with the best service, with the best characteristics wherever you are. And so that's why spectrum becomes just really so critically important. We've just seen 6 gigahertz released in the US and several other countries, and we're starting to see that expand into some of the other areas as well. So there's a phenomenal amount of spectrum that can be used very effectively and very efficiently in some of these new bands. But this gives you a little bit of an outline of, you know, just what's happening in the spectrum industry between what I would call the two dominant stacks in the world today. Next slide. So what does it mean to be in this different spectrum with these two different stacks? And so what I'm showing here, you know, I talked about in that earlier slide, you know, what are some of the stack requirements or capabilities that you need in order to do very reliable wireless services, more deterministic type wireless services, better delay type characteristics. And we put that against some of the spectrum that's out there today. And so you can look at what's going on in 6 gigahertz, and clearly Wi-Fi and 5G are both going into this unlicensed spectrum. What's going on with locally licensed spectrum? You see Germany, you see France, you see the UK, Ofcom releasing locally licensed. In some cases, quite a bit. Ofcom has 400 megahertz going from 3.8 to 4.2. But if you take these stacks and you apply it to that spectrum equation, is it spectrum that you can reserve? Can you protect the interference domain? What we see is that there's some real commonality about the capability of what these stacks can do. And so you have to be a little bit careful when we talk about, for example, 5G and R going into license. They're in a very good position from the ability to schedule on it, to protect against interference. But if you take 5G and you put it into 6 gigahertz, which is unlicensed, then guess what? It has to deal with some of the same things in that shared spectrum that Wi-Fi has been dealing with for, frankly, years. And so we can't make the assumption that the stack solves all problems. It is a combination of stack capabilities and the spectrum that you're in. And this is why Cisco's looking at some of these new ranges of spectrum like locally licensed, and hey, can you apply a Wi-Fi stack in there? Because if you could, you can schedule it, you can get a good result. Yeah.
I'm really sorry. We're going to have to move on and maybe can explore some of these issues in the discussion. I'm just conscious of time. So
apologies. Sure, I think this was the last or second to last slide.
Okay.
Maybe the last slide, and I'll just make a comment on devices and we'll quit there. So if you take these different spectrums and you look at what's happening in the industry from a standardization standpoint and from a device standpoint, what you're going to find is that there's multiple different devices using different technologies that are releasing in different times. So again, you end up with the same conclusion. How do we use these areas of spectrum with the most appropriate stack, and how do we use them together to provide the best service in both industrial and IoT and for the end user? So with that, I'll wrap up.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think you start bringing the junction of what we can call wireless multi-RAN and interoperability, and I'm sure we can address it further on the questions. Okay, with this, I propose we move ahead to our next speaker. So we shift gears to the space. So in fact, We have David Goldman, is the director of satellite policy for SpaceX. So David runs broadband and spectrum policy for SpaceX. Before coming to SpaceX, David held various leadership roles handling broadband and spectrum policy at the United States FCC, the US Senate, and the US House of Representatives. So we are glad to have you, David, and looking forward to hear more about your satellite broadband technology use cases.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's an honor to be on a panel with such great co-panelists. I frankly am a little intimidated. I'm such a fan of the Cisco report that comes out every year. I'm a little intimidated going on after that, but I'll do my best. So yeah, my name is David Goldman. I work at SpaceX, and I specifically work on the Starling project, which is our global satellite broadband system that we're in the midst of deploying. We can shift to the next slide. So just really quickly, I thought I would spend my few minutes here just kind of explaining what we're doing and explaining why there's someone who works at a launch company on a spectrum panel. We're developing a system called Starlink, which is a high-speed, low-latency broadband system that can bring broadband to every corner of the globe, into even the most remote areas. So we can go to the next slide. I thought I'd spend a couple minutes kind of just walking through how our system works, just so people can understand what we're doing. Unlike traditional satellite broadband that you may have had experience with in the past, that operates out of geosynchronous satellites that are pretty far from the Earth, and so they have great coverage, but they tend to have, you may have experienced that there's some latency issues, that there could be, it's a little slower to get back and forth. Just even at the speed of light, it takes some time to get up to the satellite and back down. What we're doing is we are licensed out of the United States Federal Communications Commission for 4,400 satellites for our initial constellation. They will be in low Earth orbit. And so by being at low Earth orbit, there's some trade-offs in there. Is on the one hand, our latency is about equivalent to what you would get on any kind of terrestrial system. We're sub 30 milliseconds for the round trip. For the end-to-end connectivity, the trade-off is you need a lot more satellites to be able to cover the globe. You see less of it, less of the Earth per satellite. So you need a lot more to be able to get the coverage, which is why we're licensed for so many. Right now, we've begun deployment of our system, or we're well into a deployment of our system. We have over 900 satellites already in orbit, and we have begun offering service in kind of the northern latitudes of the United States and southern Canada. We're seeing speeds, we're offering speeds that are about 100 megabits. We're seeing speeds that we're seeing some speeds hitting about 200. Our median latency kind of end-to-end round trip is about 25 milliseconds. And we're continuing the deployment from there. So we're around 900. We're shooting for about 2 launches per month, with about 60 satellites per launch. So it's about a 120 satellite per month cadence to fill out the rest of the constellation. Next slide, please. Thanks. On the consumer end, we have what we call the Starlink consumer kit. You can see a picture of what that antenna looks like. It's a little different than the parabolic satellite dishes that you may have seen in the past. This one is actually flat phased array. It's self-install. You get a box delivered to your house. It comes with a little stand. You can go put it out there. It attaches to a Wi-Fi box. You plug it in, you aim it at the sky, and you're done. It will find the satellites itself. It'll aim itself appropriately. In under 5 minutes from the time you open the box, you can have the 100 megabit low latency service at your house. We're currently in the United States. We're licensed for 1 million of these things. We're starting to roll them out and start sending them out to our customers. We also the same basic architecture also will work in Arctic areas. It actually is self-heating, so it can warm up the snow and clear itself off. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the last thing I wanted to comment on is I know a lot of times when you hear the number of satellites that we're talking about, that the first place where people's minds go is, are you polluting space? Are you keeping space safe? So I just wanted to make sure that I hit on this before I step back on that. We are operating. First of all, we are a launch company. We actually launch astronauts now, and the kind of our business depends on sustainable, usable space. So we operate at, if you're not familiar with kind of how space or the orbits work, basically the lower you are, the quicker it is for your satellites to deorbit and get out of there quickly. So we're operating at an altitude where our satellites, even if they failed, would be out of space within about 1 to 5 years. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that this is like a top priority for us and something we're very, very focused on. And then just conscious of the time, just one last point, because there's a spectrum panel. One of the things that I just also wanted to comment on is that all of our satellites, all of our license that we're licensed for is shared. We don't have a single exclusive use megahertz. Everything is shared. It's through multiple services, multiple different users. And so the way that you get that done, the only way that that can work is if there's policies that encourage efficiency. So one of the things I'd like to encourage everybody who's listening to this to think about is, how do you develop policies that encourage companies to build efficient systems across all technologies? Because that's the only way that we're going to be able to increase the use of spectrum going forward. I think we heard from Cisco a few minutes ago how much the intensity and demand is going up. We're going to have to be able to cram more users in there. Everyone is going to have to be better with their antennas and building systems that can share better. So with that, I think I am done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Fantastic progress in just a short window, since you guys just launched the commercial brands. I'm sure that the audience is quite excited about this development, and we all saw the news in terms of getting additional support to get your plan going. So yeah, I really appreciate that we need to discuss a bit further this locally licensed and how we can help with regulations. So I'll just hold it for the broad discussion. But yeah, thank you so much, David. I would like now to move on with our agenda. So we shift gears. So now we'll hear from a global mobile operator. So we have Mr. Liu Guangqi from China Mobile. He's going to talk about 6G vision and scenarios and candidate technology and spectrum usage. So Mr. Liu is the leading specialist of China Mobile and 6G director. He has led the activities for 5G of China Mobile since 2014. LTE and its evolution. So Mr. Liu also acted as the chair for several groups, such as the 5G EMBB program under GTI. So allow me just to hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. It's my pleasure to join this very interesting topics discussion. Okay, next page, please. Yeah, I think here I just like to talk to you about 6G. I think with the first launch of the 5G globally, we do believe it will facilitate the application of AI, cloud computing, and big data, and also mobile edge computing, and accelerate the digitalization of the society. After the digitalization, I do believe the next stage, next phase of the society development is the digital twin. That means with the digital world, we can, with the proper algorithm and proper big data, we can predict the future of the physical elements and also even the physical world, and try to conduct some intervention, operation, or maintenance in advance. And try to avoid the risk accidents to the society and make sure it's on track. And also for such kind of society status, of course, we do believe the AI can be supported anytime, anywhere, and to make the physical elements to be smart and make the world to be smart. Next page, please. Next slide. Yeah. Okay, so based on the background of the digital twin, we do believe there will have many new use cases for 6G towards the year 2030, like the holographic interaction, synesthesia interconnection, human digital twin, intelligent interaction, and so on. So we, based on these the individual use cases, we have derived their performance requirements to the 6G network. Next page. For example, from the peak data rate, from the user experience data rate, and also the traffic capacity and so on, which will be improved greatly, especially compared to that of legacy networks. Regarding the data rates, I think capacity, it much depends on the spectrum available for the deployment. So for 6G, we need to consider how to make full use of any spectrum it can be available, like the low frequency band, mid frequency band, minimum wave, even higher bands like terahertz, visible light, and so on. And also we need to consider to design the mechanism to for full spectrum access, and then we can just use this technology to guarantee user experience as they demand it. Next page. Next page, please. Yeah, from the usage scenarios from 6G, we can see we need to provide the ubiquitous coverage for the traditional terrestrial use cases, and also the ocean use cases, and even the airplane use cases. That means we need to provide the coverage for both land, sea, air, and space. So we need to comprehensively consider how to design this system, how to use and share the spectrum among different use cases, and the guarantee is a requirement. The performance can be demanded. Next page. So for the spectrum usage for future 6G network, we do believe we need to consider the further decoupling of the control and data channel to guarantee the compromise between the performance, deployment cost, and also the power consumption. We have the challenges we are facing. So we do believe for future 6G network, we need to consider a new system to provide the different spectrum usages simultaneously. For example, we can just carry the control channel on the lower frequency band to provide national-wide coverage and deep coverage, and also its power consumption can be controlled very well, and also its cost can be controlled very well. Well, the data channel can be carried on the higher band, like the mid band, higher band, and these base station can be switched on and off in an on-demand way. Then we can also share the processing capability of different base station, and thus can control the cost of the deployment, and also can save the power consumption power of the different base stations. Next page. Yeah, so just I have mentioned before, for the spectrum, we should make sure the technology can support any utilization of the spectrums available, like licensed, unlicensed, even the spectrum sharing among different services which have been defined and also be deployed with the interference management and the reliability insurance and so on. Especially for the extremely higher data rates, we need to consider even larger contiguous bandwidths for network deployment. For example, currently the academia are considering terahertz and visible lights, and which can provide more than 1 gigahertz spectrum, contiguous spectrum for extremely high data rate, like several hundreds and even several hundred megahertz, gigahertz, even 1 terabits per second. Next page. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think for the current spectrum allocated and planned by ITU regional or local regulator, we do believe we have to consider the dynamic spectrum sharing among the different system of the one operator, even spectrum sharing among the different operators, try to make full use of the spectrum which is available. because for different operators, different network, I think it's traffic is not balanced. It depends on the if we can make use of such kind of status, it will be very helpful to improve the user's experience by the spectrum dynamic sharing, which have been adopted in 5G's deployment. Next slide. Another is since 4G, we have started to consider how to make full use of the unlicensed spectrum when it is available. I think we have defined a technology like license assistant access. I do believe it will be also considered for 6G's deployment. I think that's next page. I think for the candidate spectrum for future, we do see one candidate is around 6 gigahertz, which can provide us very large contiguous bandwidth. I think it could be a good start for us now to consider it for global harmonization. That's my plan. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we'll have a very busy 10 years. And really, in terms of the candidates, there are some decisions to make. Thanks for those highlights. I would like to pick up on this 60 gigahertz topic, especially with coming from your region. I think all the world is looking into what China is going to do. But yeah, I propose that we leave it for the panel. And thanks for doing the presentation such late hour for you over in China. And I'm not sure if 6G is going to help with that, but I guess not. Okay, so moving on to our next speaker, it's Daniel Amade from Motorola Solutions. He's the Spectrum Regional Director for the EMEA region. He's going to talk us about empowering critical networks for either private or enterprise locally licensed spectrum, and also provide us a benchmark with the European development. So he carries 18 years of experience across the EMEA region, having worked both on the private and public sector, managing radio spectrum, of course, a key asset for ICT development. So Daniel, with no further ado, over to you, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can, yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Salam alaikum. And thank you for the ITU and the CITC for organizing and, of course, for Forum Global for putting this together. Could you go to the first slide, please? Yeah, just the next slide, please. So, as you know, we have heard a lot and from many experts and policymakers in the last 2 days and in the last, actually, on the WRC. Every WRC, we make more spectrum available for mobile service and other services, but specifically, we identify it for IMT. And in the last one, we have seen a significant growth, 915% over the previous WRC in terms of amount of spectrum that is being identified. Despite the availability of spectrum and opening up of all additional bands in the millimeter wave and sub-6 gigahertz, we still have the challenge in terms of for critical users and for enterprises, they still have the challenge of securing spectrum and making it available, whether through at the national level or in terms of identifying it as something that could be harmonized at a regional or global level. Thank you. Next slide, please. So at the same time, those kind of users still face the challenge that everyone still faces when they go to either remote areas or are within heavily dense events area or so on, which is availability of networks or availability of resources, or being able to restore the networks as needed in case of disasters, or have that kind of access to special users or interoperability across multiple users and multiple networks. And this is still a challenge. And I think relying only on 2 or 3 major players who are the contributors to the commercial service providers, without enabling others to invest in infrastructure that is either interoperable or complementary to the mobile networks, is a national is a policy decision, and it should be explored, especially that there's a lot more users entering into that segment. Next slide, please. So when we talk about verticals, we talk about, from the government sector, which could be, defense or special forces within the government, or to public safety, police, emergency medical services, and others, first responders, as well as to public services, government or very critical services, utilities, transportation, and others. And of course, the largest and the growing sector is the private enterprise. Across different sectors, across different users, they all are requiring either one kind of, either a shared network or a dedicated network, but in a way to enable them to invest in infrastructure that is based on commercial technology, based on reducing cost, availability, coverage, and the capability, and very more important also on to secure their networks and provide them the confidence in using such advancing technologies. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So when we look at the bands that have been identified or allocated to mobile, we're segmenting them across, there's the sub 1 gigahertz, the mid bands, whether, up to 2.6 and the 3 to up to 7 gigahertz, as well as the millimeter wave. And there is always a trade-off between, what you can get in terms of coverage, in terms of potential latency, when you have, heavily high throughput applications, as well as the capacity to handle either peak throughut or total throughput. So the localized, and they are not always available across different technologies. So you can have, LTE, NR available in some bands, while others, including LMR, in the lower bands. Next slide, please. So this is a list of countries that have considered or have already allocated or made available rules for regulations to enable local or private broadband licensing. And I will not go into the details of these countries, but I can provide at a later stage or in the discussions more insight. However, what we notice is there is a mix of mid-band spectrum and millimeter wave spectrum, and all of them are following IMT main commercialized bands. And of course, some of them are supported by LTE or NR, and some of them are only supported by 5G. And there is, of course, the mode based on first come, first served, use it or lose it, shared and exclusive modes, and of course, reduced fees to enable and encourage investments. Next slide, please. That's the last one. Next slide, please. So what we need, I think, from regulators and policymakers, they need to look at the spectrum first, to improve efficiencies, to enable more users, to encourage investments, that they need the toolbox of regulations, whether it's a dedicated, shared with incumbents, unlicensed, or shared on dynamic basis. All of these are required to enable the users to access the spectrum, and should explore the ways to address the need of enterprises and critical users, which still remains a priority. And we see, a need to have at least 50 to 100 megahertz available in sub 6 gigahertz or more in millimeter wave. Of course, there's for the PPDR at least in the sub 1 gigahertz, and we need to retain the need for LMR spectrum across, especially in the 400 megahertz for legacy applications that are able to interoperate and provide this complementary service. Thank you so much.
Glad to see the roadmap coming to life, and really that the work you are doing is also helping to move other regions along. So I think with all these presentations, now it's time just for us to go into a few questions here and form our panel. I know we need just to manage time, so I think at least for all the speakers, I would like to have a quick clarification in some of the topics you mentioned, and I see the questions from the audience already coming through. So probably starting with you, Matt. I see that you start addressing our workshop topic for today, competition and complementarity, but also Cisco being a company evolving from hardware to software, and how all this stack starts to become available to more wide wireless technologies. How do you see interoperability evolving? Is there any other things that we should consider when we make an end game decision? Are we competing, or are we complementing what other wireless silos are doing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work that's happening that I think is very complementary. If you look at something that you're very familiar with over at the WBA, something like open roaming, the ability to what I would call cross-pollinate identity so that you can roam into new business cases, I think is really important. If you look at the access networks out there, there's an incredible enterprise footprint, public area footprint when it comes to Wi-Fi, and there's an incredible and what I would say is somewhat ubiquitous footprint when it comes to LTE and 5G. So if we can combine these technologies, what we find is that we can generate a 5G experience wherever you are at the best cost for the most folks. And that's just one. When it comes to migrating to a software type implementation, what we're seeing in capabilities to distribute compute, the ability to do services for multiple stacks and to do so intelligently so that you can get the best delay and response characteristic and policy that's associated with that. I'll just mention one other thing. It's very common for a service provider network to offload into a building into something like Wi-Fi. But I think as we go forward and we see this convergence start to happen more broadly, enterprises are also going to want to be able to push policy out to the service provider for 5G access services. And that is something that I think is billable and something that can also be monetized. So putting these entities on equal footing so that we can move across them will really change the dynamic going forward.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, Matt. Yeah, that's a very good point. And in fact, I think on that note, probably, David, I think you kind of disrupt the market in this sense, because you kind of bring a new backhaul strategy, but in the end, you are using a Wi-Fi router for the last mile. So in terms of what were the decisions for you to go with this combination, were there any, I don't know, prioritization or regulatory impacts that you expected in first place that would make your life easier to make this happen so quickly?
So I guess just to clarify, so you're kind of asking, how did we come up with the model we did where we go into a Wi-Fi box and, kind of did, I guess, I don't know if it's last mile, the last few feet are over unlicensed. Yeah. So I think actually the overwhelming driver was to make this as consumer friendly as possible. And I think for anybody, Wi-Fi is a great service, it's a great technology that everybody has devices that can hook up to Wi-Fi. So, one of the things that was a priority for us is developing a system that could actually be self-installed, that when you get a box to your house, you can set up the antenna and then it just plugs into a Wi-Fi router that comes with it, and then it's interoperable with any Wi-Fi connected devices you already have. It is certainly an added benefit that you don't have to get any additional. You have to get the equipment certified, but you don't have to get additional licenses in order to be able to use the unlicensed. That's certainly a benefit, because the truth is for all the rest of our network, there's actually multiple levels of license spectrum that we have to get. So that's a nice piece for us that we don't actually, that once you have to get the equipment certified, which is that's substantial, but it's not the same thing as having to go get a license for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you solve it broadly with the combination. Just a quick follow-on. We have two questions around this topic, and I think you would expect it, David. But in terms of the LEO services becoming available outside the US, do you have any estimation, or what could help fast-tracking you covering regions outside the US?
Yeah, great. So just so everyone understands, we're working right now. We're working with as many governments as we can to try to get access to as many markets as we can, as quickly and as we can, so we can bring service to everybody as soon as possible. We've started I was mentioning it earlier, we started our beta testing now in the United States and Canada. We're working with a number of other governments. But as I was mentioning, there's basically, to get market access, we basically need to get kind of three parts. We have to get licensed in three parts. We have to get the satellites authorized to be able to transmit into a country. We have to get the user equipment authorized, and then we have to get what's called gateways, which is essentially, the user equipment talks to the satellite has to send it back down into the network. So the gateways are the big satellite dishes that then attach into the fiber that goes to the backbone. And so we have to get those authorized in country as well. So honestly, a lot of what's driving timing from a regulatory perspective is which countries, because we're bringing kind of a new system, not every country has regulations in place that can kind of address what we're doing in the right way. So we're looking for countries, frankly, I don't know if we're working with all the countries that we can, but countries where we're going to be able to turn on service faster are frankly countries that are more amenable to kind of a quicker regulatory process to get those kind of things approved.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the clarifications. Yeah, so I think probably, Mr. Liu, in terms of the China Mobile presentation, I see the audience also coming through in terms of your thoughts around the 60 GHz band. I see that you mention it as efficient spectrum utilization among different radio services, a key component for your 2030 strategy. So do you have any insights in terms of what will be the plans from China region to this band in the next few years? Excuse me, you are on mute, sorry.
I think from China, I think in next year we'll start the test in the 6 gigahertz and try to see how the coexist issue can be solved or not. And also, roughly, initially, I think now the regulator has the idea to release part of it to 5G, and the others, I think it depends on the further test and see how it can be. But from the industry perspective, our proposal is it could be considered, the whole band can be considered for the 5G, 5G's further development, or even for the 6G's development, because of the 5G and even its further evolution. The large contiguous band is very, very important to improve the user's experience. Especially, in China, we already have allocated more than 200 megahertz bandwidth for each operators. So it's for its further evolution, especially to support the XR, such kind of services. I think from the operator perspective, we need more contiguous bandwidth. So I think it's a good candidate for further user experience improvement.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So, you mentioned some starting of the testing next year, so that's good news. So I think aligned with these three topics, something that is clear is that competition and innovation cannot be hindered. And Daniel, you mentioned the very important topic around local regulations that potentially can become a breaking point to foster, for instance, investment opportunities. Do you have in your mind a few examples and potential mitigation you would suggest for those regulators?
Yeah, so there's a long list of countries that have taken steps to enable further developments and to support local licensing. So I think the previous session have covered some of them, like Germany, for example. They have reserved 100 megahertz. They just opened up for private and local licensing, and they're not putting it as in the same basket with the carriers to compete so the cost as a barrier for these enterprises as well for the spectrum licensing. On the other hand, in the UK, they have the shared access and the local license. And in other countries, there's France. There's another list of countries that have either finalized their decisions or in the process. We have the CBRS spectrum in the US, which is a multi-tiered kind of access. My point is that the regulators should be encouraged to just think outside the box of the regular, nationwide assignments, especially that these spans. It's unrealistic that the mobile operators are going to deploy, the millimeter waves nationwide or in rural areas and so on, at least in the foreseeable future. So there is a room for improving efficiency and for enabling investments. And remember that the return on investment for a lot of the commercial carriers is negative. So how do you encourage that? The only way is by having, enterprises and others bringing in, pulling similar like public-private partnership that we've had with governments. Thank you.
No, yeah, that's a very good point. In the end, we need these regulations and these policy work groups that, for instance, we have in the WBA and other forums to join forces and have a consonant messaging. Yeah, what I would like to propose is that on these five, let's say, final minutes, we would do a round in terms of understanding what's your perspective in terms of complementarity, in the sense that if there was one action that you would recommend your customers or partners to start doing after they read about all these developments, what that recommendation would be. So should they, join more global forums, talk more about the use cases, and really clear these doubts around that everyone is competing, because in the end, the users, they just want the best service they can get. And we would like to help them being directed in that front. So why don't we go by order? And if I can ask you just a few words about that, less than 1 minute, please, so we make up the time. Thanks. So Matt, would you like to get it started?
Yeah, sure. So as briefly as I can, because I tend to be long-winded, Bruno. When I look at the industry and I look at where we're coming from and where we're going, one of the things that comes to mind is that the spectrum divisions of the past are no longer true. It used to be that Wi-Fi would go into unlicensed and LTE would go into licensed, and those use cases were specific. And now we're seeing these worlds come together, and in fact, there's considerable overlap. And I some people think that that's a threat. I actually think it's good, because if the technologies overlap, that means that you can move amongst them. And so, my recommendation is to enable an architecture that allows you to go across multiple access, whether it be Wi-Fi, LTE, 5G, or even IoT technologies like LoRa, et cetera, so that you can loosely couple these to meet the business needs in an accelerated way. So that's where we're doing a lot of work at Cisco, and where we think some of this is going.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt and David. Lots of competition in markets you are entering, and it's.
Yeah, I think I want to circle back to what I had mentioned during the opening about, all of our spectrum is shared, which means in order to be able to operate, you have to have spectral efficiency. And I think kind of a complementary answer to what Matt was just saying is it's absolutely right. There needs to be investment in technology that's spectral efficient and can share within this technology and across technologies. But I think that's hard and that's expensive. And so I think the piece that needs to go with that is smart policies. I think countries need to be thinking about what are the regulations that encourage that kind of behavior, that reward companies that are investing, industries that are investing in smarter technologies, because that can share better. Because otherwise, all the incentives go the other way. Is if you can build something that can't share, then you can kind of box out your competitors. Not by being the better product, but by actually being the less efficient product that can just use up as much space. So I think we should. I kind of would encourage everybody to think about what kind of policies could we start putting in that would encourage companies that go, instead of a race to the bottom of being as inefficient as possible, do what Matt's talking about, what Cisco's talking about, is like, how do you build the technologies? How do you encourage companies to invest in the technology? How do you make it worth it to invest in technology that share better?
Yeah, the best of breeds. Yeah, perfect. Mr. Liu, will 6G avoid aisles of connectivity and lots of complementarity?
I think from the radio technology perspective, I do believe for future, I think the charging business, the business model will be totally changed. So for future spectrum usage, I think it will be use case driven. And also from regulator perspective, my suggestion is they should consider the correlated usage of the spectrum and try to guarantee the efficiency of the spectrum usage, because spectrum is very limited. And also we need to consider the user experience improvement for the future's contiguous bandwidth. So from technology perspective, we need to consider how to design some advanced technology to make full use of all these candidate spectrums for customers.
Oh yeah. Yes, and probably don't know just on the tech neutrality. Is that the way for complementarity?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to comment on the fact that the spectrum efficiency is one part, but there's also the investments that have been put into legacy systems. So if you look at it from a total cost of ownership or the overall opportunity cost, it can vary as well. But one thing that I think is important for policymakers is that users cannot ask for more and more and more of the exclusive. They should find a way to coexist and to share. And there's a role for new players, such as spectrum managers that are not the incumbent regulators that we know. And this is a way, as long as we can coexist, they should encourage innovation, and they should encourage new users to access the spectrum.
No, yes, I appreciate it, and I think that's a good mode. That probably I'm realizing that even with this team here joining the panel today, we would be able to set a strategy to clearly just put more emphasis on the complementarity rather than the competition. So hopefully we help the audience understand where things are going. And by any means, if you have questions, just reach out to me or any of the panelists so we can follow up. So with this, I think we wrap up this session number 9. I would like to thank ITU, the ITC Global Forum for helping us organize this workshop, especially Mr. Mohamed Al Abdulkader that invited us for presenting and moderating. And apart from this, I hope everyone had a good time. Thank you for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you on future editions.
Bruno,
Okay.
thank you very much, and thank you very much to all of our panelists. So yeah, another fascinating session, and really enjoyed the discussions there. So thank you all so much, and a particular thank you to Mr. Liu, because I think it's well past midnight where he is joining from now. So we do really appreciate you staying and staying up and joining us so late. So thank you very much. So almost done for today, but before we close, we're delighted to now have one final closing keynote for today's sessions. So we heard right at the start of the day from Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal on the potential offered by LEO satellite technology. And now to close the day, we're delighted to have a perspective from the geostationary satellite community. So it's my honor to now welcome to the stage Rupert Pearce, CEO of Inmarsat, who is going to be talking to us about innovations within the sector and how satellite technologies are going to connect the world. So Rupert, welcome. Looking forward to your presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dan. So we could go to the first slide. Thank you for this opportunity to articulate how satellite technology will in the coming years play an important role in helping to connect the world. I want to thank in particular the International Telecommunication Union and the Communications and Information Technology Commission of Saudi Arabia for their most gracious and warm welcome to participate in this exceptional event. In recent years, I've had the privilege of engaging with forward-thinking leaders on the topic of driving broadband adoption, including, of course, the ITU Secretary General, Mr. Hulin Zhao, and the CITC Governor, Dr. Mohamed Al-Tamimi, in my capacity as a fellow commissioner on the ITU and UNESCO's Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, whose advocacy for meaningful internet access in underserved communities around the world is extremely important. The Broadband Commission has consistently published extensive research that shows the transformational impact of broadband connectivity on human potential, communities, and nations, including the Commission's 2018 report exploring technologies in space in the upper atmosphere that recognized both the unprecedented innovation currently ongoing in the global satellite telecommunications sector and the increased role that space-based capabilities can now play in helping businesses, governments, and supranational bodies deliver not just a more connected world, but also a fairer and greener world to the planet's citizens. Today, I want to talk to you about the future of satellite telecommunications. This future is crucial to all of us, and at its core, it is about building a more resilient and inclusive global digital society. Resilient connectivity has become essential to the effective functioning of modern society, even more so during the challenging times we're facing currently with the COVID-19 pandemic. This global pandemic has disrupted global supply chains, fractured global trade, cancelled international travel, condemned the global workforce to work from home or be furloughed or to be thrown into unemployment, and temporarily shut down entire industries. We've had to respond to these challenges to ensure that a health crisis does not become an uncontrollable global economic and financial crisis, to figure out a way to overcome these obstacles, and above all, to help to mobilize an effective global medical response to the pandemic itself. Rising to these challenges, the satellite industry has played an important part, in helping to ensure global connectivity and service continuity for public and private users alike. At Inmarsat, despite the significant operational challenges all around us, we've delivered record levels of reliability for our services in 2020, enabling our maritime, aviation, government, and enterprise customers to stay in business and to trade through their adversity. We've also done our best to support them in other ways. For example, by offering free telemedicine services for thousands of merchant maritime vessels to support the healthcare and well-being needs of millions of crew members around the world, essentially trapped on their vessels as ports closed amid the pandemic. And we quickly offered both significant price discounts and cost rebates, or better credit terms and special focus support where it was most needed. While the current pandemic has placed huge demands on connectivity providers, it has also accelerated certain trends that will drive long-term growth in the business of connectivity. The increased emphasis on emerging activities or services such as teleworking, telemedicine, and remote education during the COVID-19 pandemic will lead to an accelerated structural change in our ways of working and in our healthcare and education systems. Equally, disruptions to global supply chains, the closing of national borders, and local lockdowns have driven enterprises and governments to accelerate their investment in digitalization, as well as an improved autonomy and automation. All of these activities require high-quality broadband to function. Next slide, please. Connectivity now empowers human potential as never before. Indeed, looking ahead, emerging next-generation telecommunication networks, often operating together in networks of networks, will bring faster data speeds at lower costs and lower power consumption, making broadband available to all and substantially eliminating the current massive global digital divide. They will usher in the Internet of Things era, delivering a step change in the move towards a more automated and autonomous world, and they will powerfully support green agendas and global carbon reduction commitments. Such innovation will drive new business models and services that will deliver growth in global industrial productivity, reinvent the relationship between governments and their citizens, and empower individuals and communities in new and exciting ways. Satellite technologies extend the reach of communication solutions globally, not only into rural and remote terrestrial geographies, but also onto the world's oceans, at 70% of the planet, and into the skies above us. The customer constituencies served from space are multinational and dynamic. They include the global maritime and aviation industries, which are uniquely served with over-the-horizon communications from space, as well as nearly every national government for whom space-based communications capabilities offer unique coverage, capability, and resilience. The multi-trillion-dollar maritime industry is a fundamental component of global trade. 90% of everything we make or consume passes across the world's oceans during its life, and billions of people depend on our oceans, seas, and waterways for their livelihood or their home. Our oceans are an essential bioresource for human life. 7 billion people traveled on an airplane last year, with air travel being a key contributor to economic growth and the creation of a global village. Both the maritime and the aviation industries are digitalizing, supporting their workers and travelers with real-time connectivity and addressing their carbon footprint. And global satellite broadband connectivity is a key enabler in that regard. Governments, too, increasingly need space-based capabilities to keep up with the unique demands and challenges of the internet-connected 21st century, for defense and security, international deployments, protecting their borders, and delivering connectivity to every citizen, wherever they may be located. Next slide, please. Today, the trends are indisputable. More mobile subscribers are demanding greater access to more applications, data, and critical services at faster speeds. And clearly, the reliance on cloud computing is only growing. As the future of connectivity looms closer, networks will need to be able seamlessly to talk to other networks and systems, allowing people and machines to be constantly connected, exchanging information and data, using the most appropriate system for their needs and location. The good news is that in recent years, the satellite industry has seen a generational revolution in capabilities and cost, migrating it for the first time in its history from being a niche industry to one that stands ready to play its fullest part in the coming digital revolution. The pace of technological innovation in the industry is currently the highest in more than 20 years, with data speeds exploding and value for money being transformed for the better. Most people still think of SATCOMs as clunky and expensive, the $10 per minute airphone being many people's reference point. But recent technological advances now mean that today, several million suburban citizens in North America get their home broadband by satellite from Hughes and Viasat rather than terrestrial alternatives, because satellite's capabilities and cost can now meet or exceed that of their terrestrial competitors. Inmarsat's recent history is a good demonstration of that journey. In 2005, we revolutionized the mobile SATCOMs market with a fully 3G all-IP global offering, our BGAN service, which delivered a 500 kilobit per second data experience to a laptop-sized device. Today, our broadband services deliver 150 megabits per second, and by 2024, we will be delivering data speeds of 15 gigabits per second to any point on the planet. Meanwhile, our service costs have declined exponentially. That $10 per minute sat phone cost is now less than 5 cents, cheaper than mobile roaming charges in many cases. And in the case of our broadband services, we now offer the same or better service cost as our enterprise and government customers get from their terrestrial broadband providers, meaning in some cases, they adopt our services even when they have terrestrial alternatives. That incredible transformation in global strategic relevance continues at pace, with next-generation GEO networks like Global Express, Viasat-3, and Intelsat Epic, as well as new non-GEO networks like Starlink, SES's mPower, and OneWeb. Tens of billions of dollars of investment are being made in next-generation SATCOMs capabilities to ensure that our industry stays at the forefront of innovation and can play its fullest role on the global stage. So my message to you is that SATCOMs has now entered the mainstream in terms of its commercial sweet spot and stands ready to be considered alongside terrestrial solutions such as fiber, microwave, Wi-Fi, and terrestrial mobile as a key contributor into national and international action to drive global broadband adoption. Next slide, please. Now, whilst wireline and wireless terrestrial infrastructure will always be a core component of connectivity, it is important to recognize that as wireless systems move into higher frequencies, cell coverage will get smaller, increasing the digital divide each time technology is upgraded. This is why, in a truly connected world, there will need to be an integration of technologies and systems to ensure that while next generation technologies may be born initially into congested urban environments, we maintain coverage and quality broadband services for all of society nonetheless, and continue to make progress in eliminating the global digital divide. To support this goal, it is imperative to view regulatory policies and spectrum allocations in a technologically balanced manner, so that complementary technologies are empowered and enabled to work together to deliver pervasive, resilient, high-quality connectivity for everyone. There are 3 unique attributes to space-based communications that make it a mandatory component of any national, regional, or global broadband connectivity strategy. Firstly, coverage. Satellites will always be the most cost-effective means of delivering broadband connectivity into rural and remote areas, onto the seas, and into the skies. As we move into an era where a citizen cannot be fully productive without access to high-quality broadband, and where we know that a country's GDP growth will double if its citizens have affordable access to the internet, reaching even the last 5 to 10% of a developed country's population, let alone addressing the 3 billion people left out of the global digital society in the developing world, has become an urgent, must-fix requirement for governments of the world. But it's more than just about citizens and consumers. If businesses are to embrace the power of the Internet of Things, to drive a step change in digitalization, automation, autonomy, and efficiency, to liberate the benefits of AI, robotics, quantum computing, and big data techniques, as well as dramatically lower their carbon footprint, then again, IoT network coverage needs to be truly pervasive and not limited to urban or suburban areas of the world. Satellite telecoms fills these gaps and powerfully complements terrestrial technologies to extend the coverage of next-generation networks to literally everywhere. Secondly, it's about resilience and reliability. It is fully recognized that SATCOMs offers unparalleled levels of reliability and resilience, being built for enterprise and government level robustness and being impervious to adverse terrestrial events such as bad weather or human intervention. It's the reason why SATCOMs is so often a key enabler for first responders and aid agencies in an emergency. So often, relatively fragile terrestrial networks go down in such circumstances. But the emerging global digital society that we're building will come to rely utterly on broadband connectivity to function for its smart cities, its intelligent transport networks, its smart grids, its teleeducation, its telemedicine, and so on. Broadband will become critical national infrastructure and it must never go down. And so relying solely on ground-based infrastructure doesn't make sense. We'll need to weave space-based, highly resilient and secure capabilities into a composite solution that meets our exacting requirements for the world's 21st century digital infrastructure, with SATCOMs providing an invisible and resilient overlay, guaranteeing constant minimum levels of connectivity. Thirdly and finally, space-based telecommunications technologies will offer unique capabilities that will form an important component of next-generation broadband networks. Our ubiquitous global coverage enables overlay capabilities over and above resilience, especially when combined with the government-level LPD, LPI, cyber resilience, and end-to-end security that many satellite networks are built to include. Perhaps the easiest example to understand is satellite broadcast capabilities, an incredibly efficient way to get data to the edge of any network. As broadband networks become more and more congested, putting content and capabilities at the edge will become more and more important. Equally, if the world of IoT is going to lead to the fielding of billions of smart devices, then those devices are going to need to be reached, managed, updated, and maintained. Satellite broadcasting capabilities can play a really vital role in both cases. Next slide, please. 5G isn't just about consumer and enterprise broadband and IoT. It's also about the telecommunications industry's support to the global response to a climate emergency. And in this area too, SATCOMs can play a powerful enabling role in key sectors of the global economy, helping the energy industry meet increasing demands to reduce non-renewable energy consumption, helping the agricultural sector use natural resources more efficiently and minimize pollutive activities, and driving down the huge carbon footprint of the global maritime and aviation industries, enabling both industries to decouple growth from rising emissions despite growth in global trade and air travel. To give you a sense of the scale of the opportunity here, if the maritime industry were a country, it would have the 6th largest global carbon footprint in the world, just ahead of Germany. Some of the wins are quite straightforward in this area. For example, we estimate a future reduction of more than 20 million tons of CO2 a year for the global aviation industry simply by following more precise air traffic management routes guided by real-time 4D secure SATCOMs, something already in development in European airspace under the European Commission's visionary Single European Skies initiative. This is likely quickly to be adopted elsewhere around the world to augment aging and overwhelmed legacy HF radio networks. For airlines, a solution to route congestion. For passengers, less time waiting at the gate or circling the destination airport. And for the world, safer skies and cleaner air. In this way, SATCOMs can be an enabler for life-changing contributions that build towards material climate change reductions and a greener planet. Next slide, please. But all of these incredible advances cannot be enjoyed by all if they are not delivered to all. Governments and regulators play a critical role in overcoming digital divides in both developed and emerging economies and will inevitably shape the transformation of the Internet of Everything into the Internet of Everywhere. We agree with the ITU discussion paper, Setting the Scene for 5G Opportunities and Challenges, which wrote that satellites will integrate with other networks, rather than be a standalone network to provide 5G capability, and is this integration that forms the core of the vision for satellites in 5G. Satellite will augment the 5G service capability and address some of the major challenges in relation to the support of multimedia traffic growth, ubiquitous coverage, machine-to-mean communications, and critical telecom missions. Indeed, while there are so many important economic and social areas where SATCOMs can deliver powerful broadband solutions to its traditional, isolated, or disadvantaged user base, the power of space-based communications capabilities is only fully liberated when it is extended into a partnership with terrestrial solutions into or extending from urban and suburban environments, delivered alongside and in close collaboration with complementary terrestrial communication solutions in the form of rich, diverse, and highly resilient networks of networks. Final slide, please. In conclusion, satellites will play an integral role in the further democratization of next-generation connectivity. I'm delighted to be a participant in the important conversations that are shaping the fourth industrial revolution and our internet-connected future. And I'm glad to have been able to scratch the surface of the infinite possibilities satellite offers to us all with you today and into the future. As the importance of connectivity continues to grow for society, as demand continues to grow with it, we must work together to ensure the digital divide between the haves and the have-nots of the internet age does not grow still further. Indeed, we must collaborate to close it, and to do so quickly, because if we do, then absolutely everyone will benefit. The have-nots will be brought into the modern world as a fully functioning global citizen, able to be fully empowered economically and socially, and to benefit instantly from the reach of the global internet. And the haves will benefit from the expansion in global trade and the ability to reach new consumers instantly via the same global internet. As in the years to come, we build the networks of networks that will deliver high quality, highly resilient, secure mobile broadband to benefit all of humankind, the satellite industry will continue to play a crucial and growing role. Because of its unique characteristics and capabilities, regulators around the world need to place space-based communications at the heart of their strategies and plans, ensuring that satellite operators can access global markets fairly, have access to adequate spectrum to deliver their vital services, and are enabled to collaborate with terrestrial communications providers to deliver reliable and affordable broadband for all. Thank you so much for your time. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with you.
Rupert, thank you very much. And we really do appreciate your time. I'm just going to mute your mic because there's a bit of feedback, so apologies. But thank you very much for that, and we really do appreciate your time, and really do appreciate those thoughts, and for giving us that overview of the exciting innovations within the satellite sector, and the role that satellite is going to play in delivering the role that satellite can play, is already playing in delivering the connected world today, and will play in the future as well. I think that given that one of the main themes of the event has been about collaboration between different technologies, I think it's a very fitting way to wrap up this second day. So thank you so much. As I said, really do appreciate your time and you joining us for that keynote presentation. So thank you. So that wraps things up for today. Again, a really busy day, but I hope you've all found it as interesting as I have. There's been some fantastic discussions. If you haven't been able to catch all of the panels and all of the presentations from today, then a quick reminder again that all of those have been recorded, and there will be links sent out to all of you to be able to catch up on any of the sessions or any of the presentations that you have missed. And we're back here again tomorrow. So back here again at the same time tomorrow. We again have a number of panel discussions. We have three more keynote presentations and another thinking point. So we will be back here again on behalf of CITC and ITU, our event organizers. Once again, thank you so much for your participation at the event today. I wish everyone a fantastic rest of the day, rest of the evening. And as I said, looking forward to seeing you all back here again tomorrow for day 3 of the conference. Thank you all very much, and see you tomorrow.